They said it was too hard for someone like me. So I decided to show them what someone like me can do. I still remember the day like it was yesterday. The kind of day that lingers. Not because anything terrible happened, but because the world quietly reminded me of where I supposedly didn't belong. I walked into the boardroom that morning, my heels clicking softly against the polished floor, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. My laptop bag swung at my side, nothing out of the ordinary, except I already knew it wasn't going to be ordinary. I had been at this company for 4 years. 4 years of late nights, early mornings, and enough coffee to fuel a small army. I knew our clients inside out. I knew the processes like the back of my hand, and yet, here I was, about to be told I wasn't enough. My manager, whiteboard behind her gleaming under the corporate lights, looked at me with what I can only describe as polite skepticism. She cleared her throat and said it, like a sentence, carefully measured to sting without leaving a mark, though it did. "Charmaine, we don't think you're quite ready for the Hamilton account. It's high profile, sensitive. We think someone with more experience should lead this one." I nodded, smiled even. Inside, my chest tightened, not with anger yet, but with the sharp edge of recognition. Recognition that this wasn't just about experience. This was about the world quietly, invisibly, doubting me because of who I am, because I'm black, because I'm a woman, because I've had to work twice as hard for even half the recognition. I watched as my colleagues shuffled papers, pretending not to look, and one of them, a man I barely spoke to, leaned slightly and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "It's not really a race thing, you know, but this client's sensitive." I wanted to snap. I wanted to tell him exactly where he could put that comment, but instead, I took a slow breath, the kind that gathers every ounce of composure and channels it into quiet strength. I stared at the charts projected on the wall, the numbers reflecting the work I had poured months into, and I realized something. This moment, this dismissive, subtle, tiny humiliation wasn't the end, not by a long shot. I have spent my entire career learning to listen, to observe, to let people underestimate me. And in this silence, in the quiet of what they considered my limits, I found freedom. Freedom to plan, freedom to prepare, freedom to prove that they had no idea what someone like me was capable of. I walked to my seat at the end of the table, laptop in front of me, and let them continue their polite, corporate discussion. They spoke of deliverables, budgets, KPIs, and all the while, I calculated, plotted, and imagined. I imagined the moment when I would not need to argue, not need to justify, not need to fight loud. I imagined the numbers, the results, the undeniable proof that would speak louder than any dismissive comment ever could. There was a pause in the conversation. One of those corporate silences that feels heavier than any confrontation. My manager glanced at me again. "Don't worry, Charmaine. Maybe next time you'll have the opportunity. Next time." Their subtle way of saying, "You're not ready yet." But in that moment, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. I felt a quiet firelight in my chest. Not anger, not resentment, but determination. I closed my laptop softly, almost imperceptibly. I glanced around the room, meeting eyes with no one in particular. I didn't need to announce my next move. I didn't need to explain myself. I only needed to begin. Because the truth is, the best revenge, the smart revenge, doesn't come in words. It comes in action. It comes in results. And I was about to start building results that no one could ignore. I looked back at the projection screen graphs, charts, timelines, and I pictured them 6 weeks from now. I pictured them realizing, finally, that the person they doubted wasn't lacking. They were mistaken. That someone like me wasn't a limitation. I was a force. A carefully measured, quietly unstoppable force. As I sat in that room, the clock ticking softly on the wall, I whispered to myself, almost as a mantra, they said it was too hard for someone like me. Maybe it was, but I'm going to show them anyway. And just like that, the story began not with confrontation, not with noise, but with calm, deliberate intention. The kind of intention that doesn't announce itself. It simply works, and works. And when the time comes, it speaks louder than any voice ever could. That morning, as I left the boardroom, I didn't carry resentment. I carried focus. I carried precision. I carried the quiet knowledge that I was about to turn the tables in a way no one expected. And for the first time that day, I smiled not at them, not for them, but for myself. Because I knew the game had just begun. And in this game, someone like me doesn't lose. They thought they were saving me from failure. What they really did was give me freedom to win my own way. The next few days were strange, almost eerily quiet, except for the kind of quiet that makes you hyper-aware of every small gesture, every glance, every email, every subtle tone that hints you're not quite enough. I had been reassigned temporarily. My manager insisted to a smaller project, less budget, fewer clients, fewer eyes watching. A chance to prove yourself, she said. But anyone with eyes could see the subtext. We don't trust you with the big one. I didn't argue. I smiled politely in meetings, nodded when feedback was given, and went through the motions. On the outside, calm, composed. On the inside, every nerve was alert. Every comment, every slight, every smirk, it went into a mental ledger. Not for revenge, not yet. Just awareness. The first week was the hardest. The small projects team barely looked at me. I'd send emails with critical updates, only to be CC'd out of important conversations. Slack messages that should have been straightforward were subtly sarcastic. One colleague, a man I'd always considered neutral, dropped a casual remark in the weekly check-in. Let's see if Charmaine can handle the smaller one first. The words were polite, almost benign, but the tone? It dripped with doubt. I froze for a split second. My gut wanted to react, to defend, to prove them wrong on the spot. But I didn't. I've learned that the kind of people who underestimate you don't deserve a show of force. They deserve results. Quiet, undeniable, impossible to ignore results. So I did what I always do when faced with doubt. I observed. I documented. I noticed patterns, inconsistencies, the small flaws that everyone else overlooked. Emails sent with wrong attachments, missing data in reports, processes that could be automated but weren't. These were things no one else had the patience to see. And every time a subtle humiliation happened, every time someone smiled a little too wide, every helpful suggestion that was really a way to highlight my supposed inadequacy, I filed it away. Not as bitterness, not as grudges, but as fuel, motivation, precision. There were moments that stung more than others. In one meeting, a senior account executive presented a report I had meticulously prepared. She casually said, I made a few adjustments here, just tidying things up. Didn't want Charmaine to get overwhelmed. I smiled, thanked her. On the inside, my teeth clenched. Overwhelmed? Really? She had no idea what I was capable of. And the irony? Her adjustments were mostly corrections I had already anticipated, planned for, and prepared. Another time, I sent a crucial data sheet to a client, CCing the team as protocol dictated. Someone replied all, politely pointing out a small formatting error. It was a tiny thing, a missing decimal in a long spreadsheet, but suddenly it became a discussion point in the next team call. My professionalism was questioned, my competence lightly doubted. All polite, all professional, all designed to make me feel small. But I didn't crumble. I started keeping notes, not just project notes, but mental notes of every subtle dismissal, every implied limitation. I made charts. I tracked KPIs. I traced every workflow, every client communication, everything they thought would be a weakness. I turned into a map of opportunity. By the end of the second week, the pattern became clear. They weren't protecting me from failure. They were freeing me from the politics of the main project, the distractions, the constant oversight, the implicit pressure to perform in a space that rewarded optics over results. They had handed me a sandbox. One, no one was watching. One, where I could build. And build I would. The humiliation was real. The exclusion was real. And yes, the subtle racism and microaggressions were real too. But I didn't need to fight back in the moment. I didn't need to defend myself to anyone. That would be noise. And I was planning for signal, the kind of signal that couldn't be ignored. Results, proof, excellence. I found solace in the work itself. I stayed late, reviewed every email, cross-checked every metric. I practiced workflows and spreadsheets at home, tested automated sequences for clients, prepared contingency plans no one had asked for, every detail meticulously crafted, every KPI carefully tracked. I was building, quietly, patiently, deliberately, and slowly. A shift began within me. The sting of humiliation became fuel. The doubt of others became focus. The subtle dismissals became reminders that I had to rise, not loudly, not angrily, but with precision, with proof, and with dignity. One afternoon, sitting alone in the empty office, I looked at the dashboards I'd been tracking. Cost efficiencies, client retention, project timelines, every small improvement stacked together. I smiled softly to myself, not with pride in a boastful way, but in recognition of what was possible, what I was capable of. They thought they were saving me from failure. What they really did was give me freedom to win my own way. And that's when it clicked. The small project, the less important assignment, they weren't a punishment. They were my arena, the space where I could work in silence, unseen, unheralded. The space where I could gather proof that no one could argue with. From that day forward, every meeting, every task, every subtle slight became part of a larger narrative, a narrative that I was writing alone, a narrative that would not be loud, not boastful, not defensive. It would simply exist, and when the time came, it would speak louder than any skepticism, any microaggression, any patronizing comment ever could. I left the office that day with the same calm composure I had walked in with, but something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just enduring. I was preparing, and preparation, I realized, is where true power hides. In silence, in patience, in unshakable dignity. Because soon, very soon, the work itself would become my voice. And no one would be able to deny it. Be honest, what would you do if it was you sitting in that room? Drop your thoughts below. I want to hear you. They were busy doubting me. I was busy building proof. The first night after realizing the freedom I had, I stayed late. Not because anyone asked me to. Not because anyone would notice. But because I knew exactly what needed to be done. My desk was quiet. The hum of the office AC filling the space around me. My laptop glowed in the dim light. Charts, spreadsheets, client emails, all of it spread out like a battlefield map. I started small. I automated repetitive tasks that the team had been tolerating for months. Simple macros in Excel, automated email sequences, client reporting dashboards that updated themselves overnight. Nothing flashy, nothing anyone would notice immediately, but it worked. and it worked perfectly. Then, I moved on to the data itself. Historical client files, financial reports, campaign performance data, they were all messy, inconsistent. Some errors were minor, some were glaring. No one had ever bothered to correct them thoroughly. I traced every mistake, noted patterns, created a system to flag anomalies before they even became a problem. Hours turned into nights. Nights turned into early mornings. And still, I didn't say a word to anyone. I didn't announce my plans. I didn't ask for validation. I didn't fight for recognition. Because recognition without results is empty. I needed proof. Undeniable proof. And the results started to show. Quietly at first. Costs that had been creeping upward began to drop. Client feedback, which had been lukewarm at best, started showing a subtle but steady improvement. Metrics that no one else had tracked now told a story. One of precision, of competence, of someone paying attention when no one else would. I remember one night, sitting alone in the office, the glow of the computer screen reflecting off my glasses, when I realized the numbers were already speaking louder than any doubt had ever been. Cost per acquisition down by 32%, engagement rates rising steadily, client retention up 47%. Not a single pat on the back, not a single nod of recognition. And that was perfect. Because when the time came, the proof wouldn't be about seeking approval, it would be undeniable. I also focused on relationships, quietly, behind the scenes. I made sure clients understood processes, addressed small complaints before they became issues, and anticipated every question before it was asked. By the time my managers noticed the improvements, it wouldn't be a surprise. It would be a statement. During this process, I noticed how the team continued their subtle doubts. Casual comments, suggestions, and patronizing emails were still there. But now, instead of frustrating me, they became markers. Checkpoints in a race only I knew I was running. Each slight became a motivator, each doubt a puzzle piece I would turn into proof of my capability. I began visualizing the final picture. The client reports, the charts, the dashboards, all perfect, all accurate, all optimized. By the time anyone realized what had changed, the results would be undeniable. The best part? They wouldn't see me coming. I didn't need anyone to watch me do it. My work would speak for itself. Late nights blended with early mornings. Coffee became fuel, not ritual. My apartment filled with spreadsheets, sticky notes, and quiet planning. I tested campaigns multiple ways, double-checked client histories, implemented workflow automation that reduced errors by half. Every tiny improvement stacked on top of another. Slowly, imperceptibly, the smaller project became stronger, leaner, more efficient. And still, I said nothing. I resisted the urge to explain, to justify, to push for recognition, because recognition without proof is just noise. I had learned that lesson long ago. This wasn't about showing them immediately, it was about creating an outcome so undeniable that their doubts would crumble on their own. There were moments of doubt, late at night, staring at numbers that didn't add up, emails that had to be reworked. I asked myself if it was worth it, but I remembered the subtle glances, the offhand remarks, the quiet disbelief that had greeted me when I was denied the Hamilton account. And I smiled, because those moments weren't setbacks, they were fuel. By the fourth week, the project was already performing beyond expectations. Metrics that had once been flat or declining were now climbing steadily. Process efficiency up 40%, campaign delivery times cut by 25%, client satisfaction scores higher than they'd ever been. I sent updates as required, quietly CCing only those who needed the information. No announcements, no press releases, just numbers, just proof. And in that silence, I began to feel something rare in corporate life: control. Not control over people, not control over perception, but control over reality itself. I had shaped this project from doubt to undeniable success, all without raising my voice, without confrontation, without attention. One evening, alone in the office, I looked at the final dashboard for the week. My finger traced the graphs: cost down 32%, client retention up 47%, overall KPI increase 185%. My eyes caught the glow of the monitor and I whispered to myself, they were busy doubting me. I was busy building proof. That's when I realized the power of silence, the power of work itself, the power of proof that no one could dispute. And I knew, when the time came, the world would see. Not the struggle, not the frustration, not the whispers of doubt. They would see results. Real, tangible, undeniable results. And in that quiet, I started to imagine the moment when all those who had doubted me, all those who had underestimated me, would have no choice but to face the truth. Not in a meeting, not in a confrontation, but in the one language that no one can ignore: numbers, performance, excellence. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to beg for validation. I just needed to work. Quietly, precisely, relentlessly. And when the time came, the proof would do the talking. That night, I left the office later than anyone else. The hallway was dark, the hum of the building muted. My heels clicked softly on the tile. I didn't feel tired. I felt prepared. I felt ready. Because in that quiet work, in the unseen effort, I had already started to turn the tables. And I knew, deep in my bones, that when the moment came, I wouldn't just succeed. I would win. Not loudly, not angrily, but with a kind of quiet, undeniable authority that leaves no room for doubt. You won't believe what happens next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. I already fixed this 6 weeks ago. You just didn't think I could. 6 weeks. That's all it took. 6 weeks of quiet work, meticulous tracking, constant optimization. And now, here I was, being summoned to a crisis that could have easily ruined the project ID left in someone else's hands, or so they thought. The phone call from my manager was brief, clipped, almost apologetic. Charmaine, can you take a look at this? We're running into some issues on the Hamilton account. The client has raised concerns. Can you help? The words stung, not because of the request, but because of what they implied. They had ignored the warning signs it highlighted. The spreadsheet's ID sent weeks ago. The emails flagging potential errors, the suggestions I had quietly documented. They had been overlooked. I arrived at the meeting room, calm, composed. Everyone else's energy was frantic. Charts were projected on the screen. Red numbers flashing. Client complaints. Budget overruns. Missed deadlines. The tension was thick enough to cut through the polished corporate air. They looked at me expectantly, as if I were a magician summoned to save a show gone wrong. I took my laptop out, opened the files I had prepared weeks ago, and scrolled through the data calmly. Every discrepancy, every inefficiency, every small warning I had sent weeks prior, it was all here. Documented, time-stamped, and ignored. 5 seconds passed in silence. 5 seconds that felt like 5 minutes. Eyes on me, shoulders tense, the room frozen. Then I spoke. Quietly, deliberately. I already fixed this 6 weeks ago. You just didn't think I could. The room went still. Not stunned like a dramatic movie moment, not theatrical. Just stunned in a way that only truth, undeniable truth, can create. I pulled up the corrected dashboards, the automated reports, the workflow optimizations. Charts glowed with improvements. Cost reduced by 32%, client retention up 47%, Project efficiency up 185%. Everything I had predicted, flagged, and improved months ago was now in plain sight. No embellishment, no drama, just proof. I could feel the air shift in the room. People who had once smiled patronizingly at me now avoided my gaze. The ones who had questioned my capability were silent, caught in the undeniable reality that I had outperformed expectations, not with noise, not with confrontation, but with skill, foresight, and precision. One colleague, the same one who had muttered that it's not really a race thing, cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably in his chair. Another, a senior project manager, simply nodded slowly, as if acknowledging the magnitude of what they had ignored. And then I said what needed to be said, not to boast, not to gloat, but to close the gap between doubt and fact. You didn't need to wait for me to fix this. You could have listened, but that doesn't matter anymore. The data is clear. The process is optimized. The client's concerns are resolved. No anger, no resentment, just calm authority, backed by results. The subtlety of the moment was important. I wasn't here to humiliate. I was here to show that results speak louder than assumptions, louder than microaggressions, louder than doubt. The proof was objective, undeniable, and entirely silent, exactly as I had intended. I saw one of the junior team members, a fellow black woman, lean slightly forward. Her eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I could see pride shining there, not just because I had succeeded, but because she knew what this meant for all of us. The ability to rise, quietly, through diligence and mastery, even in spaces where others would prefer you fail. The meeting continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Suddenly, the frantic energy was replaced by listening. Questions were asked differently, attentiveness sharpened, and all because the proof was right in front of them, undeniable and indisputable. I left the meeting room with the same calm composure I had entered with. No one cheered, no one congratulated me, and that was exactly how it was supposed to be. Recognition would come in the right time and the right way. For now, I let the results speak. Because in corporate life, true smart revenge isn't about confrontation or drama. It's about preparation, skill, and timing. It's about creating outcomes so undeniable that the world has no choice but to acknowledge them. And in that quiet, methodical preparation, the tables had turned. Not with anger, not with spectacle, but with proof. As I sat at my desk later that evening, opening the final client report and watching the clean, accurate numbers fill the dashboard, I allowed myself a small, private smile. I had been underestimated, doubted, and dismissed, and now, quietly, flawlessly, my work had spoken. And for the first time, I felt the thrill of control, the satisfaction that comes not from vengeance, but from mastery, from the undeniable knowledge that when the time came, there would be no question, no argument, no excuse, only proof. I already fixed this 6 weeks ago. You just didn't think I could. Oh, don't have to fight loud when your work speaks in numbers. The next week, something shifted in the office. It wasn't spoken, but you could feel it, the quiet recalibration of respect. The same people who used to offer me advice now paused before speaking. My inbox, once filled with polite dismissals, now filled with, "Can you take a look at this?" and "would love your input." I didn't gloat. I didn't roll my eyes. I just did what I always did. I worked with calm precision. But inside, something deeper had settled. Justice. Not the kind that comes with applause or awards, but the kind that comes from truth being undeniable. The following Monday, we had a meeting with the executive leadership team, a big one. They wanted an update on the Hamilton account, the same project I was once told I wasn't experienced enough for. As we filed into the glass-walled conference room, I noticed the irony. Same chairs, same faces, same polished smiles. Only difference. This time, they were waiting for me to speak. The VP of Strategy began, voice tense but polite. Charmaine, we've reviewed your latest data models. Impressive work. Could you walk us through how you stabilized the campaign performance? I stood, clicked the remote, and the screen lit up clean dashboards, efficient workflows, results glowing in shades of green. It wasn't about reinventing the system, I began. It was about seeing the details everyone else thought were too small to matter. Slide after slide, the data unfolded like a quiet storm. Cost per acquisition, down 32%. Client retention, up 47%. Campaign ROI, up 185%. Customer satisfaction, highest in 3 years. No fluff, no drama, just truth. You could feel the room change as the numbers appeared. People leaned forward. Pens stopped clicking. The silence was thick, not of doubt, but of realization. And then, the VP asked the question that made the moment unforgettable. What do you think was the biggest reason for this turnaround? I looked straight at him and said, calmly, you stopped watching me fail long enough for me to succeed. Silence. The kind that hits like a wave. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I didn't blink. I just let the words sit there precise, unshakable. Someone shifted in their seat. Someone else let out a quiet exhale. It wasn't defiance. It was truth. And truth has a sound all its own. I continued, steady and factual. When I was moved off this project, I understood the reasoning. You wanted to protect the client. You didn't think I could handle high-profile pressure. What I learned is that pressure doesn't define competence, performance does. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room to deliver the most impact. You just need to be the most consistent. A few people nodded slowly. The same senior manager who once said, let's see if Charmaine can handle the smaller one first, now couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't need him to. The work had already spoken. As I ended the presentation, I clicked to the final slide. It was a simple one. Just a quote, id, added quietly at the bottom of the dashboard. Justice isn't loud. It's proof. The room stayed quiet for a full 5 seconds. Then, applause, not thunderous, not forced, but real, measured, earnest. The VP stood up and said softly, Charmaine, I think we owe you an apology and a promotion. But that wasn't the moment that hit me hardest. It was when I caught sight of Danielle, the only other black woman in that room, sitting 2 seats away, smiling at me through glassy eyes. She mouthed, thank you. And I felt it the reason this all mattered. Because this wasn't just about me proving them wrong. It was about proving us right. Proving that dignity, patience, and excellence could still win in spaces designed to doubt them. As the meeting ended, people began to file out, shaking my hand, murmuring compliments they should have said months ago. And yet, the only words that stayed with me came from Danielle as she leaned over and whispered, you didn't just win for yourself. You won for all of us. That was the moment the smart revenge landed, not in humiliation, but in elevation. Not in shouting, but in quiet grace. Because real justice isn't about making them feel small. It's about standing tall, without needing to explain why. As I walked back to my office, the sound of heels echoing on the polished floor, I realized how different it all felt now. The same space that once made me shrink was now mine. The air itself had shifted, not because I demanded it, but because my work had rewritten the narrative. You don't have to fight loud when your work speaks in numbers. That sentence kept echoing in my mind like a soft mantra. And I knew, deep down, this was the justice I had been building for all those silent nights. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The kind that simply is. If you've ever been overlooked or underpaid, this part's for you, and if you feel that, hit that. They saw my strength, but I finally saw my peace. The week after that presentation felt quiet, not the uneasy kind of quiet that makes you second-guess yourself. This was different, the kind that follows a long, hard storm. The kind where everything stills and you can finally breathe again. Emails slowed. People smiled when they passed my desk, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. That Friday, HR sent out a company-wide announcement. We're proud to recognize Charmaine Parker for her outstanding leadership on the Hamilton project. Her data-driven strategy has set a new company benchmark for performance and integrity. Underneath, my name was bolded Director of Campaign Analytics. Promoted. I stared at the email for a full minute, barely breathing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even smiling yet, just still. Because it wasn't the promotion itself, it was what it meant. It meant I was no longer the one being overlooked. I was now the one being referenced. That evening, as everyone packed up, Danielle stopped by my office. She leaned on the doorframe, that same warm, knowing smile on her face. "So, Director Parker, how's it feel?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Honestly? Like it took me 10 years to be seen for something I've always been." She nodded slowly. "That's the thing about being a Black woman in corporate, Charmaine. We're always proving something people should have already known." Her words sank deep. They weren't bitter, they were just true. We went out for drinks that night, nothing fancy, just two tired women sitting at a small rooftop bar, the city lights flickering below. And for once, we didn't talk about metrics or deliverables or deadlines. We talked about freedom, how rare it feels, how heavy it costs. I told her something I hadn't said out loud before. "You know, Danielle, I used to replay every meeting in my head, every word I said, every pause, every time I didn't speak up enough or spoke up too much. I thought maybe if I just found the right tone, the right look, the right corporate way, they'd finally see me. But the truth is, they never saw me until I stopped trying to be who they expected." Danielle raised her glass. "And that right there," she said, "is the real promotion." We laughed, but it hit deep. Monday morning came again, same office, same elevator, same view from the 14th floor. But everything felt different. Now, when I walked through the hallways, people didn't just say, "Hi," they listened. New hires started stopping by my desk. Young analysts, especially the women of color, wanting advice. They'd whisper things like, "How did you stay calm when they overlooked you? How did you know when to speak and when to let your work talk?" And I'd tell them honestly, "You don't always know. You just have to decide what kind of story you want your silence to tell." I started mentoring one of them, Jasmine, a brilliant data engineer who reminded me so much of myself 5 years ago. Bright, eager, careful, too careful. During our first session, she asked, "Miss Parker, do you ever get tired of being the only one who looks like you in the room?" I thought about that. Then I said, "Every day. But I also remember someone has to stay long enough to make sure we're not the last." Her eyes softened. That's when I realized this was bigger than career success. This was legacy. 2 months later, the company held its annual awards gala. I wasn't expecting anything beyond a seat at the table and a decent meal. But when they called my name for leadership excellence, integrity and action, something inside me froze. The applause filled the ballroom, but all I could hear was my heartbeat. As I walked up to the stage, I saw faces, some proud, some humbled, some still learning what this moment meant. The CEO handed me the glass plaque, smiling. "Charmaine, your work reminded us all what accountability and courage look like in real time. You didn't just deliver results, you set a standard." I took the microphone, hands steady. "Thank you. This means more than you know." But I want to dedicate this to the women who came before me, the ones who worked twice as hard for half the credit, whose stories didn't get told in emails or awards. And to the women standing beside me now, still holding their breath in rooms where their voices echo softer than they should. Don't shrink. Even when they don't see you, the work remembers. The truth remembers. And one day, your name will be bolded too. The crowd rose, standing ovation. But it wasn't about applause. It was about arrival. After the ceremony, Danielle found me again, teary-eyed but grinning. You just baptized that whole room in truth. We laughed until we cried. Later that night, I got home, took off my heels, and stood in front of the mirror. No makeup, no camera, just me. For the first time, I didn't see the only black woman in the room. I saw a leader, a survivor, a believer, the kind of woman my younger self had needed to see. I whispered quietly to my reflection, "We did it." And I meant we. Every woman who'd been dismissed, doubted, or diminished. Every one of us who kept showing up anyway. Because that's the real victory, not the title, not the salary, not the applause. It's knowing you changed the air in the room. You made space for truth to breathe. And maybe, just maybe, the next woman won't have to fight as hard to be seen. They finally saw my strength. But I finally saw my peace. Justice isn't loud, it's proof. It's been 6 months since that night, the night they handed me the plaque and called me Director Parker. 6 months since the room stood and clapped. 6 months since I realized that the sound of justice isn't a roar. It's the quiet click of results loading on a dashboard. It's the whisper of a woman finally exhaling after years of holding her breath. These days, my life looks different, but not in the ways people expect. Sure, I have the corner office now, the glass door with my name etched in silver, the view of the city that used to feel so far away. But the real change isn't outside. It's the way I walk into the building. It's the way I no longer shrink my sentences or overthink my tone before every meeting. It's the way my laughter doesn't feel like a risk anymore. And maybe that's what victory really is. Not fireworks, not applause, but the slow reclaiming of space that was always yours. Sometimes, people still ask me about that day, the moment I said, "I already fixed this 6 weeks ago." They call it my mic drop moment. They love that part. It's the clip that went viral inside the company's Slack. They think that's the revenge. But it wasn't. That line was just clarity. The real revenge was showing up again the next morning, with my head high, with more grace than they expected, with the proof already in motion. A few weeks ago, I was asked to speak at a leadership summit, Women in Corporate Resilience. I almost said no, because honestly, I'm still learning what resilience really means. But I went. When I stepped on stage, I saw 100 faces. Black women, brown women, first-generation professionals, each carrying that same invisible weight I once carried. I looked at them and said, "They'll tell you to find your voice. But sometimes, your work is your voice. It speaks in data, in deadlines, in the things you build when no one's watching. And when the time is right, it speaks louder than any title they can give you." The room went silent. Not because it was dramatic, but because they felt it. Every nod said, "Yes, that's exactly it." That night, a young woman came up to me, probably in her late 20s. Her eyes were glassy, her voice steady. "I'm the only Black project manager on my team," she said. And after every meeting, I ask myself if I said too much. Hearing you made me realize I don't have to be quieter to be accepted. I just have to be consistent. I wanted to hug her right there, because I knew that feeling, that lonely negotiation between visibility and survival. It's exhausting, and no one prepares you for how much it takes out of you. So I told her, don't carry their doubt like it's your duty. You were never meant to fit their frame, you were meant to redefine it. She smiled, and in her smile, I saw my younger self, the woman who once sat at her desk late at night, whispering, don't give them the satisfaction of watching you break. Now, when I walk through the office, I notice things I used to miss. The framed photos of diverse teams, the new mentorship programs, the way young employees speak more openly about being themselves. It's not perfect, but it's progress. And I've learned that sometimes justice isn't a tidal wave, it's a ripple. One honest act, one woman refusing to be small, one data point that tells a different story. Those ripples turn into culture. And culture, that's where real justice lives. I think a lot about legacy now. Not the kind that gets written in company newsletters. The quiet kind, the kind that shows up years later when someone says your name and smiles because they remember how you made them feel capable. Legacy is when your proof outlives your pain. On Fridays, I stay a bit later than usual. After everyone leaves, I turn off the fluorescent lights and let the city glow in through the window. The hum of traffic below sounds like white noise, steady, familiar. I sit at my desk and look at the framed printout of the old KPI board, the one that used to define my worth in numbers. Next to it is a sticky note that simply says, "Justice isn't loud. It's proof." And I smile, because it's still true. Sometimes, I think about how it all started, that first meeting where they said, "It's not really a race thing, but this client's sensitive." I used to replay that moment with anger. Now, I replay it with gratitude, because that sentence pushed me into becoming who I was always meant to be. If they hadn't doubted me, I might never have built the systems that proved them wrong. I might never have learned how to lead with calm, how to weaponize silence into strategy. They thought they were protecting the client, but really they were preparing me for my purpose. Every once in a while, people ask if I ever think about leaving, finding a new job, a new company, something less heavy. But I don't. Because this place, this space that once tried to shrink me, is now where I build ladders for the ones coming after me. I mentor. I advocate. I make sure credit is shared and effort is seen. I call out bias without burning bridges. I've learned that sometimes you don't have to tear the system down, you can rewire it from the inside. And maybe that's what real power is. Not escape, but transformation. Last week, Jasmine, the engineer I mentor, got her first big client win. She ran to my office, grinning from ear to ear, holding a printed chart like it was gold. "Look, Miss Parker, retention rate's up 60%. They said it couldn't be done." I laughed, proud and soft. They always say that, until it's done. She hugged me, and I swear for a second I saw the future brighter, fairer, fuller. When I got home that evening, I opened my journal, the same one I've been keeping since the day I got transferred to that small project. I flipped to the first page, where ID written, "They said it was too hard for someone like me." And beneath it, I added a new line. "So I built a path for everyone like me." That's what this story really is, not revenge, not redemption. It's revelation, that the loudest justice isn't shouted, it's lived, that grace can be power, that showing up, day after day, with integrity, is its own kind of resistance. And if there's one thing I want, the next woman, the next Charmaine, the next Jasmine, the next anyone to know, it's this. You don't have to prove your worth to people who can't recognize it. Prove it to yourself. Build your own evidence. Because proof, that's forever. The screen fades to black. We see her office at night, quiet, glowing. Her silhouette by the window, calm, certain. The faint sound of piano and low bass hums in the background. The camera slowly zooms on her handwritten note pinned to the board. Justice isn't loud. It's proof. Then, A final whisper, her voice steady, full of light. They said it was too hard for someone like me. Maybe it was, but I did it anyway. And now, so will she. Fade out. Soft soul music swells hope, not triumph. The feeling that something has ended, but something greater has just begun. Thanks for listening to this story. If it spoke to you, subscribe for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind us who we are. And for every Black woman ever told to stay quiet, speak anyway.